I do think the number one criteria that candidates consider when making a move, or that could be joining a company or leaving a company, is around culture.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside.
Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Jay Klaus, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Fantasy Football Season himself, Eric Hornung.
We are back, baby.
We are back.
I have no idea what I'm doing this year. I'm walking down a hallway blind, Jay. I started doing research again, and I was like, who? What? Jamal Williams is on the Lions? When did that happen?
I just had my first draft last night. It was a whole lot of fun. I streamed several hours of mock drafts on YouTube beforehand so I could get a good feeling for what I want to do. We have not drafted yet, so I'm not going to give you any hot tips on who I'm thinking about picking up, but I love our draft. I love our league. I love this auction style 2 quarterback deeps. I love deep leagues, so I'm very much looking forward to it.
It's tough. It's esoteric. You can't, jump in and just like pull up a cheat sheet and say, who am I going to draft? You got to come in with a strategy, come in with a thought process. It's kind of like fantasy VC, Jay. It's, there's no standardized rules.
It's true. More game theory than I think is involved in fantasy VC, but maybe I'm not deep enough into fantasy VC. I just love the idea of filling your roster with an incredibly talented team. And that is what we're talking about today here in this episode, Eric. We are speaking with Sam German, a client partner in SPMB's Emerging Markets Practice. SPMB helps companies find top executive talent. They're a sponsor of the show here. And we've seen a lot of trends in the changing way we work and the changing way that companies are hiring right now, 18 months into the pandemic. So I thought it'd be fun to bring Sam on the show to talk about what she's seeing from her standpoint at SPMB.
What position is the CEO on a fantasy football team?
Got to be the quarterback, right?
I don't know, does it? It could be a running back. It could be a wide receiver. It's really up to you, Jay.
Depends how we're talking about it. I mean, I would imagine that you would want to draft your CEO first. It's probably your highest value draft pick, in which case it'd be the first round pick. But the CEO is not the only executive talent that you're going to want to hire, that you're going to fill on your fantasy roster of company executives. And SPMB helps with all kinds of search for executives, technical, non-technical, executive, reporting to the executive. And I don't know, Eric, we've seen a lot of trends with remote work, and you and I have talked a little bit about what does remote work really look like? Is it really going to be remote, or is it going to be remote first? Are people going to have like satellite offices? So all things we can explore here in this chat with Sam.
I think this is super timely because we're at an all-time low in unemployment, or if we're not there, we're pretty close, and we have been there for a while. And it feels like, look, you talk to a lot of people, I talk to a lot of people. It feels like the talent market is super competitive right now. So this is going to be a very timely conversation for those startups that are looking at how do we hire that executive team.
We'd love to hear your thought on this episode as you listen and what you're thinking about the future trends in hiring. You can tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm, and we'll get to that interview right after this. Eric, on this show, time and time again, founders talk about the importance of hiring great employees.
And they always say it's so hard and so important early on to hire the right person.
It makes a lot of sense that it's difficult because most founders don't have experience doing high-level searches or hiring top-level talent.
And they're also limited to their local talent pool a lot of the times.
That's why a lot of founders choose to work with SPMB, one of the fastest-growing executive search firms in the country. For over 40 years, SPMB has specialized in recruiting upper management and board members to early-stage VC-funded startups and larger growth stage companies too.
They bring the knowledge of a large global firm and combine it with the personalized service and attention of a boutique.
They have a dedicated team focusing on the Mountain West and Midwest emerging tech markets, so no matter where you are in the country, if you're trying to hire top-level talent, SPMB can help you out.
If that sounds like you can go to upside.fm/SPMB to learn how they are closing hundreds of C-level searches annually.
Sam, it's so great for you to join us here today. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me on, Jay and Eric. I love the podcast. Kudos to you for creating it. My search practice at SPMB is purely focused on executive search for growth stage tech companies that have been founded or are headquartered in the Midwest and Mountain West, basically anything between the coasts. So when I heard of your podcast, I thought, these are my people.
Totally. And I remember connecting with you probably close to a year, even longer than that before now. What I don't remember is how you initially found us.
I'm about to share an anecdote that feels very pre-pandemic, but I was traveling to St. Louis from Colorado on business, actually, to meet with Balto. I had been introduced to Balto by the team at Jump Capital, was doing my homework, found your podcast with the team there, and was just kind of blown away by the caliber of your podcast guests and really the pulse you have on the startup landscape outside of Silicon Valley. Super, super relevant to the work that I do.
Speaking of the pandemic, it feels like that getting on a plane, it's a whole new world now when it comes to doing work. We all established Zoom, and remote work became a thing. A lot of people were working from home. So I'm curious, in your line of work, how has the pandemic directly affected executive recruiting?
Yeah, so I think you're right. Absolutely. At a macro level, wide forced acceptance of remote work and a remote first workplace happened pretty much overnight. In addition, I think we saw this mass exodus away from the coast. People were moving out of San Francisco, out of New York. I think for us, both the podcast and for our practice, super exciting. Right? For me specifically, this has created more opportunity on both sides of the talent marketplace. More companies are founded in Middle America than before. I think I was reading something about ROI on VC dollars invested in non-Bay Area markets is just staggering right now. Chicago, for example, has the best ROI on VC dollars in the country, and that includes the Bay Area. And then, of course, we have more and more candidates who are not located in the Bay Area or New York or on the coast anymore.
Well, I know you're a client partner for the emerging markets practice at SPMB, but with the prevalence of remote first work, remote first companies and opportunities, does that make kind of a geographic specialization a little bit more irrelevant?
You asked that in a very diplomatic way, right? Like, I think you could have said, does what you do even matter anymore? And I'll be honest with you, I had such an identity crisis around this. I was formally promoted to partner earlier this year. And when you do that, you have to really create your brand and create a business plan to the managing partners. And for me, that's all around non-Bay Area, non-coastal recruiting, really centralized around something that at the moment didn't quite seem to matter. But as I really sat down and thought about some of these trends, my hot take is that this geographic specialization actually matters more now than it ever did before.
Wait, dive into that hot take a little bit more, because are you seeing that companies are actually like requiring executives to be located at HQ, or is it something else?
So believe it or not, yes. I mean, not all of them, right? Before the pandemic, we had way more searches that required relocation. But as a firm, we still relocated 27 candidates between 2020 and 2021 to new geographies. I can think of places like Bozeman and Denver and Phoenix and across Canada. For example, I have clients in Edmonton and Toronto. We were surprised to see continued threads of requirements around candidate location at headquarters with the exec team.
Are there particular or like specific functional areas that necessitate or need a non-remote leader?
So it largely depends on the company. We've definitely seen themes in engineering and operations. So think customer service, customer support, customer success. Basically, any instance where a company might still have a fairly large dev center or call center. In those cases, companies would still see it as mandatory that an executive still interact on a day-to-day basis with teams in those dev centers or call centers.
How about like in general? How many companies are truly remote first or don't have plans to go back into an office?
I think high level, most. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say 80 to 90%. That said, my body of search work tends to focus on direct reports to CEOs within high growth tech companies. So Series A, Series B, Series C. A lot happens in the hallways, at the water cooler, at an ad hoc coffee meeting. I'd say 100% of the time, my clients would prefer to find someone who is either located in their market or willing to relocate. That said, not so much a requirement.
Talk to me about job candidates and their preferences right now. How many of them that you speak to or that your firm speaks to are happy with remote work the way it is, working from home, versus how many would actually prefer to go back into an office, which is something that I've heard from people that sometimes they like that separation at times.
I love reading about this, and it seems like every day someone in my LinkedIn network has posted a poll about this, and the results are always pretty staggering to me. I don't know about you two. My preference is work from home forever. What do you two think?
Same. I feel like I've made a lot of life choices just to enable this capability, and now everybody has it. So I'm a little salty about that, but I am a work from home person.
I drove 15 minutes from the office to come record this podcast, so I might be in the opposite camp of you two. But I do I like the flexibility of being able to work from home.
Yeah. And I think, Eric, your point of view probably represents the majority based on what I'm seeing. I think it's such a mixed bag. We could probably record an entire podcast dedicated to this topic alone. Anecdotally, I've had search processes that have been remote first, where we engaged with candidates who, at the beginning of a search process, thought, I'm all in, I'm used to working from home. Then over the summer, they started to go back into their own offices and interact with their teams and realized, I love this. I need this. I need to have the opportunity to see my team regularly. I think people are people, right? You hear everything from I'm burnt out all the time working from home because there are no boundaries to I love the freedom and flexibility like Jay and I. Then to your point, Eric, there's this new model of hybrid in-person and virtual. I think a lot of companies are doing something cool, which is translating some of their real estate dollars into quarterly team offsites at fun locations. I have a client in Austin who's doing just that, and they're planning trips for their teams in places like Jackson Hole and Nashville, and that can be such a wonderful way to kind of get the team together and build morale.
Well, while we're on the topic of trends and ways of working that are getting more attention or changing a little bit, something that comes up a lot in my world now also is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how companies are taking a step forward, more of a step forward to improve those initiatives. What are you seeing from your position at SPMB in terms of companies accelerating or improving their DEI initiatives?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up. This is so incredibly important and really, I would say, top of mind across every single executive search at the firm right now. And I think you can think about the unique role of a search partner in helping clients shape their DEI strategy in, I think, two core ways, right? So there is this sort of immediate impact route where in a search, there is a mandate around hiring a diverse executive. Whether or how the client defines that is up to the client. And then there is this other path by which we can help advise our clients around longer term strategy. And so that can look more like bringing on executives with track record and well-formed opinions about hiring diverse teams. The other piece is often looking into industries that are outside of tech. So as an example, I had a very successful project last year that resulted in a diverse placement into a consumer mobile tech company. We ended up finding a candidate out of financial services who was a phenomenal fit, and that candidate just so happened to be a diversity candidate. So there are lots of things to think about in that bucket. Again, probably could dedicate an entire podcast to that alone, but I do think it's important to partner with a search firm with some experience and guidance on that topic.
Let's continue down this path of kind of big trends and themes that are top of mind lately. In 2021, I think one of them is the Great Resignation. I imagine you've talked to a ton of candidates lately because so many are on the move.
It is insane. Search cycles are longer. It is absolutely a candidate-driven market right now. I read the statistic last week that a company has something like 28 days to close a candidate once that candidate engages in a process. It's just bonkers. I don't know. It's so top of mind right now. And I think we are constantly having conversations with our clients about their expectations of the market. And that's another thing I'd throw out there. I mean, I think it's important for us to develop a collaborative relationship and true partnership with our clients, because a spec will change over time depending on what the market yields. And right now, in most executive level searches, we absolutely need to keep an open mind and have some flexibility.
In such a competitive market, setting compensation aside, how do candidates decide?
I wish I lived in a world where no candidate was motivated by compensation.
It's a big thing to put aside.
That is a big thing to put aside, 100%. And unfortunately, many times it does come down to that, especially because the bulk of our clients, of SPMB's clients, particularly in my practice, are growth stage, pre-IPO tech companies where we might be competing with talent that are coming out of public companies or more interested in a narrower scoped role because it's an opportunity to join a $1 billion market cap company. There will always be that subset of candidates. That said, optimistically, I do think the number one criteria that candidates consider when making a move, or that could be joining a company or leaving a company, is around culture. I mean, I think the number one indicator, the number one stat that I read over and over again is just like happiness with someone's boss, someone's supervisor. It's so critical, and I think can just make and break someone's day-to-day experience of their working life.
How do you see that reflected in placements? Is there any regionality to that, or what kind of drives happiness and culture?
I see this all the time, even in searches that don't have any kind of geographic mandate, particularly for my Midwestern clients and candidates. I constantly see each gravitating to the other. I lived in Chicago for 6 years before moving to Boulder. I often tell my clients in the Midwest that I speak Midwest. I don't know. There's just a Midwestern sensibility. It's like kind of hard to explain.
It's kind of like if you know, you know, but
Exactly.
We say ope. Did you just say ope at the same time I said ope?
Yeah,
ope?
I did.
Yeah, or it's humility is a quality that comes to mind. I think kindness, politeness, respect, not to say those qualities are missing in coastal companies. I definitely don't want to offend huge swaths of people on this podcast, but yeah, man, there's just a Midwestern niceness that just seems to be the case over and over again.
Does this Midwest sensibility apply to like lifestyle as well? I feel like my Midwestern friends approach life a little bit different than my coastal friends.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I'd be remiss not to call out some themes that are more appropriate to the Mountain West. So I live in Colorado. I'm in Boulder. I have many clients in the Mountain West between the Denver Boulder area, Bozeman, Salt Lake City. I have a client up in the Canadian Rockies in Edmonton, and not to overly generalize, but there's definitely a work hard, play hard mentality here. People work their butts off, but then they also go for a trail run or go for a mountain bike ride over lunch or on a work day, or in the wintertime, if it's a powder day, they hit the slopes. I mentioned my client in Bozeman. I've done 2 searches for that company, and we've relocated people to Bozeman successfully from both Austin and Utah. I think there's just a sensibility around that resulted in a very specific type of person being the best possible candidate for those roles.
So we've talked kind of about regional sensibilities, regional lifestyles. Do you see many companies in kind of the central US hiring Bay Area based execs?
Definitely. It happens. I often hear that my clients would prefer not to. I think there is a legitimate fear that Silicon Valley or Bay Area based candidates will turn over quickly. And I think it's because they live in a highly competitive market. Additionally, many folks may realize down the road, like we said a couple minutes ago, that they miss going into an office with a team and would prefer not to work remotely for the rest of their career. And not to mention comp, right? Despite the mass exodus, San Francisco and New York are very expensive. The cost of living is high, and therefore candidates in those markets have higher compensation expectations.
Yeah, we can't always put compensation aside, as we did in a previous question. What about national companies, specifically Silicon Valley or San Francisco-based companies? Do you see them doing much remote hiring?
I do. Yeah, I think there is a broad theme of the concept of a second HQ or a second or third office. We see co-working spaces across the country host really second offices or fairly large groups of people from companies that are headquartered in the Bay Area. For example, Freshworks has a huge presence here in Denver. One of our early clients in Colorado was Gusto. And as an example, we helped hire their first chief customer officer to build out what was really supposed to be a customer support call center, ops center in Denver. But Denver has become such a great place to recruit top talent in tech that now that office has surpassed their San Francisco office in headcount. In addition, I think for Bay Area based clients who are open to hiring someone outside of the Bay Area, it can be really cost effective, like we just mentioned. And my practice is really unique because I have an amazing research team that is really dedicated to becoming the subject matter experts on these top companies and top talent in these emerging markets. So if a client in San Francisco not only is open to hiring someone in Chicago or Indianapolis or Salt Lake City, but they're excited to do that, and that's becomes almost a requirement, we're armed with the best information to help them be successful in that.
Well, I love when our partners are armed with the best information. Sam, thank you so much for spending time with us today to provide some color and context around what the executive search landscape looks like now that we're 18 months into a pandemic and in just a crazy time in general. If listeners want to learn more about your practice and SPMB, where should they go?
Yeah, and thank you both so much. Keep doing what you're doing. We are so excited to partner with the podcast and really look forward to new episodes. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, they can, of course, find me on LinkedIn, Samantha German, German, or my email is samantha@spmb.com. Or, of course, you can visit our website, spmb.com, which I think has a really nice logo splash page that highlights all of our amazing clients.
Jay, what's your favorite podcast app named after a fruit?
Gotta be Apple.
Can you think of any other ones?
I tried really hard, but I didn't want to wait for too long. I didn't want too much dead air.
Hey, you know what's worse than dead air? Not getting reviews on Apple Podcasts from your listeners.
Oh my gosh, it is the worst. Every day that I wake up and I don't have a new review on Apple Podcasts, I just look up at the sky and I go, ah!
I like how the first thing you do when you wake up is to look at Apple reviews.
If only I was lying. But I'm not, and I'm looking for new reviews for Upside on Apple Podcasts, Eric. And if you are listening to this right now, you could be that person that helps get the day started right.
All you have to do is go to Apple on your iOS device or web browser, log in, and leave us a review. 5 stars would be nice. 4 stars would be great. Let's do 5 stars.
Let's do 5 stars. Definitely prefer 5 stars. Even if you don't use Apple Podcasts as your preferred listening app on an iPhone, please take a moment to rate us there anyway. It helps us bring on great guests. It helps us climb the charts. Our show will get better if you do this very simple act. So please.
All right, Jay, we just spoke with Sam from SPMB, and I know where I want to start, but where do you want to start?
Sounds like you want to start in the office and I want to start at home.
Oh, that's true. Here's the thing about the office. It's just a place. I am a big believer in space, and you at home have built your entire life around having your space. You have your basement. It is kind of your space to get away, to be doing your thing. And unless your kitty cat comes down there and bothers you, there's really no connectivity between your office and your home. You can feel like you're out of things if you want to. You can feel like you're in the office if you can't. I don't think everyone has that luxury, and I think a lot of people want the office to be their place to get away, to focus, and then when they're home, for that to be home. So I'm pro office, but I'm also pro flexibility. And that is my clarification on my piece from the interview.
I think that's a good take, because I do also hear the when can we go back into the office chatter. And I hear it mostly coming from people with families. Not to say I have no family, but people with children, I should say. Not because they don't love their children, they want to get away from their children, but because it is difficult, I'm sure. I actually can't speak of direct experience here, but I'm sure it's difficult to operate at the level that you and I are accustomed to operating if we had a human baby or human child here next to us. I have a fur child, I have the cat. The cat is a problem in and of itself, but imagine if that cat could speak English.
And had 4 limbs that were very uncoordinated. Anyway, so yes, I think that was a good conversation around where people are going. I think that there is going to be a happy medium that we accelerated to where there's more flexibility. I'm already seeing it in the old stodgy industry that I'm in, where people are more comfortable with video calls, more comfortable with taking meetings over the phone or over a video call. It doesn't mean it's all the time, and face-to-face still exists, but Fridays have become more flexible. Conversations have become more flexible. And one thing that I'm curious on that came out of Sam's conversation is we, in this outside of Silicon Valley world, often treat talent and migration patterns as if they're completely interchangeable. So, you see all these articles where it's Miami is gaining the most people now, or Austin is gaining the most people now. And those people all come from somewhere. So I think the regionality concept that Sam was bringing up from her firsthand experience of hiring people and what is successful is interesting in that it's not like, okay, now it's hot to move to San Francisco, so everybody who was born in Florida moves to San Francisco, and then they moved to New York, and then they moved to Austin, and then they moved to Nashville. That mobility across regional sensibilities and lifestyles, it's not interoperable.
I'm not entirely sure I know what you're saying. You're saying it's not about the hot place to be because it's a hot place to be. It's more so rooted in, does this person have some sort of tie to that area?
Maybe tie, or maybe sensibility that's similar to. But I think we tend to look at those macro numbers and just think people can and do move everywhere and anywhere. But there's another layer beyond that when you get down to the nitty gritty of finding someone a job and placing them in that job. It's not just, yes, move here because there's a job here.
Something we touched on a little bit that I've been spending more and more time thinking about is DEI. I'm going through some DEI training right now with a great company called the Courage Collective. And I'm learning a lot. I am reckoning with my privilege. I think that, the pipeline question is a difficult question for a lot of companies, and a real benefit of working with a search firm like SPMB is you can expand the pipeline beyond your immediate pool and your immediate connections, because SPMB is in this world. They're building relationships and tapping into new pools of talent all over the place all the time. So if there is a DEI initiative at a startup company, somebody listening to this and they're saying, how am I going to solve this issue? I feel like a search firm might be a great complement to your initiatives and at least partial solution.
Absolutely. If you have the intention, you can give the mandate, whereas you might not be able to fulfill it yourself as readily.
All right. Well, we'd love to hear what you think about this quick episode with Sam from SPMB. You can email us hello@upside.fm or you tweeted us at upsidefm. If you want to learn more about SPMB, you can go to upside.fm/SPMB to learn a bit more about their practice. Get in touch. If this did resonate with you and you want to reach out to Sam, let her know that we sent you, and we'll talk to you again next week. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear what you think about this episode, so tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm and let us know. You can learn more about us and browse our entire back catalog of episodes at upside.fm. And if you love our show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That goes a long way in helping us bring high-quality guests to the show.
Rocky and Sylvester. Super underrated, super underpaid. Today I'm gonna get it and there's nothing in my way.